The text arrived at 5:12 in the morning, cold as steel. My son wrote that I was not joining the cruise because his wife wanted just family. He forgot that family does not exclude the mother who paid for the ticket. I have kept every receipt and every broken promise like a match in my pocket. I typed back a simple, "Okay, but I am already arranging a trip they will never forget. My name is Lorraine Bishop. 58 years of living in Seabrook Harbor had taught me that the salt air eventually rusts everything, even the things you think are made of iron." I was standing in my kitchen with a cup of lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed against the granite counter. The screen lit up with that message from Ethan. "My son, you're not joining the cruise. Sloane feels we need this time to bond. She wants just family." I stared at the words, just family. The phrase hung there, heavy and suffocating. I am his mother. I carried him, raised him, and buried his father while he stood in the back, checking his watch. But now, apparently, family was a club I no longer had the credentials to enter. I pressed the call button immediately. It rang once, twice. Then it went straight to voicemail. I did not leave a message. I just held the phone tight enough to turn my knuckles white. A moment later, a second text arrived. "Don't make this hard on us. Mum. You'll understand." Eventually, I lowered the phone and looked up at the refrigerator. Right there, next to a coupon for dry cleaning, was a glossy magnet featuring the emerald horizon. It was the newest ship in the fleet, gleaming white against a turquoise ocean. Below the ship, the date was printed in bold June 12th. I laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound that barely made it past my throat. They wanted just family. My mind drifted back to the day of Richard's funeral. The rain had been relentless. Ethan and Sloane had arrived 20 minutes late, blaming traffic on the interstate. They stood by the graveside for exactly 45 minutes before Sloane started whispering about a dinner reservation they could not miss. Before they drove away, Ethan had hugged me, a quick, stiff embrace that felt more like a transaction than comfort. "Don't worry, Mom," he had said, his eyes scanning the parking lot instead of looking at me. "We'll look after you. I promise." That promise had lasted exactly 3 weeks. Then the calls stopped coming, and the visits turned into excuses. I walked over to the mahogany desk in the living room and pulled open the bottom drawer. It slid out with a smooth, expensive sound. Inside, organized in a crisp manila folder, sat the paperwork. I pulled out the printed cruise tickets. I pulled out the credit card statement from last month. I pulled out the email confirmation that had been sent to my inbox, not his. Every single document had my name on the billing line, Lorraine Bishop. The total cost was over $8,000. I had paid for the balcony suite they were so excited about. I had paid for the drink package Sloane insisted was necessary for her relaxation. I had paid for the excursions to the Mayan ruins. I had presented it to them as an anniversary gift, a way to bring us all together after a hard year. And now, they were uninviting me from the vacation I had purchased. The audacity was breathtaking. It was not just the cruelty that stung, it was the assumption. They assumed I would just take it. They assumed I was the same quiet, grieving widow who nodded politely while they walked all over her. They thought I would sit here in Seabrook Harbor, water my hydrangeas, and wait for them to send me a postcard. They were wrong. I felt a shift in my chest. The dull ache of rejection was rapidly hardening into something much colder and much more useful. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg. I picked up my phone and took a screenshot of Ethan's texts. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. I typed the name slowly and deliberately, Exhibit A. Then, I opened the browser and navigated to the cruise line's website. I logged in with the credentials that were, of course, mine. I clicked on the tab marked Manage Booking. My cursor hovered over the link that said, Passenger Manifest Special Requests. If they wanted a vacation without me, they were certainly going to get an experience they had not bargained for. I used to be someone who commanded rooms. For 30 years. I served as the operations manager at Redwood and Vale Logistics. I moved freight across oceans and coordinated supply chains that kept factories running on 3 continents. I was the woman who solved problems before the CEO even knew they existed. But grief has a way of shrinking a person. When Richard died, the silence in our house became louder than the roar of the shipping docks. My health faltered under the weight of the loneliness, and I retired early. I traded my tailored blazers for soft cardigans, and somewhere along the way, I allowed myself to become small. Ethan used to be my anchor. We had a language of our own, built on inside jokes and late-night pizza after his soccer games. He was the one who held my hand at the funeral, his grip tight and reassuring. But then he met Sloane. The change was not sudden. It was a slow, painful erosion. His voice on the phone shifted from warm to professional, like he was speaking to a client he did not particularly like. Every plan had to be run by her. Every decision was filtered through her preferences. I became an appointment in his calendar, something to be managed rather than cherished. 3 years ago, he came to me with a desperate look in his eyes. He asked for $20,000. He called it a seed investment for a tech venture that could not fail. I transferred the money within the hour because I wanted to believe in him. I never saw a return. I never even saw the principal. When my birthday arrived that year, a package came in the mail. It was a scented candle from a discount store and a card with a pre-printed signature. No note. No message of love. Just the generic script of a dutiful son checking a box. I let it happen. God help me. I let it happen because the alternative was an empty calendar. I swallowed the insults like bitter pills. I remember a dinner last Thanksgiving. I had teared up mentioning Richard's favorite carving knife. Sloane rolled her eyes, loud enough for the whole table to hear. She's being dramatic again. Just ignore it, she had said to her sister. I looked down at my plate and said nothing. I thought silence was the price of admission to their lives. I thought if I made myself smaller, I would fit into the little space they had left for me. But silence has a way of eating you alive unless you channel it. I started going to a local baking fundraiser just to get out of the house. It turned out I had a talent for more than logistics. My artisanal cookie boxes started selling out in minutes. The women there did not see a sad widow. They saw a capable artist. It was the first time in years I felt my spine straighten. I realized I was still Lorraine Bishop. They look at my modest car and my older house and assume I am scraping by on a fixed pension. They see a woman who needs financial guidance. They have no idea. Richard was a careful man. He left a life insurance policy that was substantial. I have a portfolio of stocks that has performed quietly and brilliantly. There is a trust fund Ethan knows nothing about because Richard suspected our son lacked the discipline to handle it. I am not destitute. I am simply discreet. The memory that haunts me most is not the money or the insults. It was last winter. I slipped on the icy patch of the driveway. My ankle snapped with a sound I can still hear in my nightmares. I lay there in the snow, shivering, and dialed Ethan's number. I just wanted to hear his voice. I wanted my son. Sloane picked up. I told her I was hurt. I told her I was scared. Mum. Honestly, Sloane sighed, the sound sharp against the receiver. We're in the middle of dinner. If it's an emergency, call 911. Then the line went dead. I lay in the snow for 10 minutes before I summoned the strength to call the paramedics myself. That click changed me. It cauterized the wound. I realized then that I was not a priority. I was a nuisance. So, looking at the magnet on the fridge, I felt a calm determination settle over me. If they want just family, I whispered to the empty kitchen, I will show them exactly what that word means when the truth walks into the room. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had not used since Richard's estate was settled. Marla Keene answered on the second ring. She was the kind of lawyer who did not waste time on pleasantries, a woman who wore sharp suits and sharper expressions. I explained the situation, my voice steady, though my hand gripped the receiver tight enough to hurt. I told her about the text, the cruise, the money, and the silence. Marla listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a beat of silence before she spoke. Lorraine, listen to me carefully, she said, her voice low and serious. Do you want justice, or do you want peace? I looked out the window at the grey ocean churning against the shore. I had tried peace for years. Peace had gotten me ignored, disrespected, and almost discarded. I want them to stop. Permanently. I said, then do not yell, do not fight. Document, Marla commanded. I want every text message exported. I want the bank statements highlighting the cruise payments. I want the email chains. If they are going to play games with your money and your life, we need to build a fortress of paper around you. Do not confront them yet. Let them think you are rolling over. I spent the next 3 hours turning my home office into a war room. I printed the cruise receipt showing the payment of $8,400. I printed the transfer history where I had sent Ethan money for rent, for cars, for debts. Then I called a local security specialist Richard used to know. I did not want a complex alarm system. I wanted cameras. I ordered high-definition units for the front porch and the interior office. I was not trying to spy on grandchildren I barely saw. I needed to record the adults. If they came to my house to bully me into submission, I wanted their faces and their words captured in 4K resolution. Just as I was organizing the files, a notification pinged on my laptop. It was an email from the cruise line. The subject line read, Request received modification to itinerary. I opened it, and my breath hitched. It was a confirmation of a request to remove passenger Lorraine Bishop from the manifest due to a family emergency. The request had not come from me. It had been sent from Ethan's personal email address. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a cold fury. They were not just uninviting me. They were impersonating me. They were actively interfering with a commercial transaction I had funded. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was a crime disguised as a family squabble. I forwarded the email to Marla immediately. Her reply came within minutes. She attached a draft document titled Cease and Desist. Print this. Marla told me over the phone a moment later. But do not send it yet. This is your ace. Keep it in your pocket. I have a better idea. I said, looking at the calendar. I am going to meet them, not here, at the port. Lorraine. That is risky, Marla warned. I will tell them I have a final gift to sign over before they board. I said, my voice smooth. They won't be able to resist the promise of more money. I'll catch them right at the check-in desk. I hung up and went back to my computer to clear out some old files, preparing for the battle ahead. I clicked on the trash folder in my email client to empty it. That was when I saw it. A deleted email thread I must have archived by mistake weeks ago without reading. The subject line was innocuous, FWD information for review. I clicked it open. It was a forwarded message from Sloane to Ethan, dated 2 months ago. Attached was a PDF file. The title of the document made my blood run cold. Guardianship options for aging relatives with cognitive decline. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. This was not just about a vacation. This was not just about excluding an annoying mother-in-law. They were building a case. They were researching how to take control of my life, my assets, and my freedom under the guise of caring for a senile old woman. I downloaded the PDF and saved it to the folder marked Exhibit A. "You want to play games?" I whispered to the empty room. "Fine. Let's play." The phone finally rang at 2:15 in the afternoon. I let it ring twice before picking it up, ensuring my voice sounded just a little breathless, a little unsure. "Ethan," I asked. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said. His voice was dripping with that specific kind of syrup people use when they are talking to a toddler or a pet. "Look, I got your messages. We didn't mean to upset you. We just think you should stay home and rest. We will come see you as soon as we get back." Before I could answer, Sloane's voice cut in. She was obviously on speakerphone, hovering over the device like a hawk. "Lorraine, honestly, don't make this into a thing," she snapped, though she tried to layer a veneer of concern over her irritation. "The ship is massive. The walking alone would be too much for you. We are just thinking of your health." I paused. I looked at the surveillance monitor on my desk, where I could see the crisp, clear image of my front yard. I took a deep breath and pitched my voice into a lower, shakier register. "Yeah, maybe you are right," I said, letting a tremor bleed into the words. I have been feeling so tired lately, and I do forget things. I guess I am just afraid of being a burden. The silence on the other end was heavy with satisfaction. I had just confirmed their narrative. I had just handed them the script they wanted to read. "See, we knew it," Sloane said, her voice instantly brighter. "Actually, Lorraine, since we are talking about you forgetting things, Ethan and I were thinking, if your memory is slipping, maybe you need some help with the bills. You know, just to make sure nothing gets missed. That might be helpful," I murmured. "Great," Sloane said, pouncing on the opening. "Let's meet for coffee. Just to sign a few papers so we can handle the administrative stuff for you while we are gone. It will be a load off your mind." I agreed to meet them at the Roasted Bean, a coffee shop downtown. I arrived 15 minutes early and selected a table in the corner. It was not a random choice. I checked the ceiling and saw the blinking red light of the security camera directly above us. When they walked in, they looked like the picture of successful young professionals. Sloane was wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my first car, and Ethan looked polished, though he refused to meet my eyes. We sat down. Sloane wasted no time. She slid a thick envelope across the table. "It is just a standard limited power of attorney," she said, flashing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "It just lets us pay your utilities and handle the cruise refund for you." I put on my reading glasses, my hands trembling slightly for effect. I looked at the document. The header said limited, but the fine print was a different story. Clause 14 granted the agent the ability to liquidate assets. Clause 20 gave them access to safe deposit boxes. This was not about paying the electric bill. This was a handover of my entire life. My goodness, I said, squinting. The print is so small. I reached for my water glass and deliberately knocked my reading glasses off the table. They clattered to the floor. Oh no. I am so clumsy, I said, bending down. While my head was under the table, I pulled my phone from my purse and tapped the record button on the voice memo app. I placed the phone face down on the table as I sat back up, looking flustered. I really should read this carefully, I said. It seems complicated. Sloane sighed, a sharp exhalation of air through her nose. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the wood. Lorraine, it is standard language, she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming harder. We don't have time for you to read every single line. We leave in 2 days. I know. But I don't understand this part about the stocks, I said, pointing to a paragraph I understood perfectly. Ethan looked out the window at the passing traffic. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. Sloane, however, leaned in closer. Her perfume was overpowering, something floral and aggressive. Listen to me, Sloane hissed, abandoning the pretense of kindness. We are trying to help you. But if you are going to be difficult, if you can't manage your own affairs, then we might have to look at other safety options for you. You know, places where professionals can watch you 24/7. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the catch. She had just threatened me with institutionalization. She had just weaponized the guardianship scheme I had read about in the PDF. And now, I had it on tape. I looked at her, then at Ethan. I let a slow, confused smile spread across my face. I picked up the heavy stack of papers and clutched them to my chest. Well, if it is that important, I certainly need to read it in better light, I said pleasantly. I will take it home. I can't sign something I can't see. Can I? Sloane looked like she wanted to scream. Her jaw worked tight, grinding her teeth. But she was in a public place. She was under a camera. And she thought she was dealing with a senile old woman who would eventually fold. Fine. She spat. Take it. But we need it back by tomorrow. Do not lose it. I won't. I promised. I stood up, tucking the evidence into my tote bag. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I did not look back, but I could feel Sloane's glare burning into my back. They thought they were tightening the noose, but they had no idea they had just handed me the rope. The conference room in Marla's office smelled of stale coffee and expensive toner. Across the mahogany table sat Calvin Rook, a forensic accountant who looked more like a weary detective than a numbers guy. He did not offer me sympathy. He offered me spreadsheets. Mrs. Bishop. I am going to be blunt, Calvin said, sliding a thick binder toward me. You are not looking at a family that is merely living beyond their means. You are looking at a financial house of cards that is exactly one stiff breeze away from collapsing. I opened the binder. The first page was the employment verification for Ethan. Your son was not just overlooked for a promotion, Calvin said, tapping the page with a pen. He was terminated from Bright Kite Systems 6 weeks ago. Performance issues. He has been pretending to go to work every morning for 42 days. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Ethan had told me he was leading a new project. He had lied to my face, and likely to his friends, to keep up the charade. And his wife, I asked, my voice steady. Calvin flipped the page. Sloane Whitaker. She is currently under internal investigation at her former firm. It has not hit the criminal courts yet, but there is a dispute regarding $50,000 in unauthorized entertainment expenses. Her credit is frozen. They applied for a mortgage refinancing last month to pull equity out of their home. It was denied. I stared at the red numbers on the page. $50,000. The cruise, the dinners, the designer clothes. It was all a performance. The Emerald Horizon trip was not a vacation. It was a final, desperate curtain call before the lights went out. They are drowning, I whispered. And you are the life raft, Calvin said. He pulled up a printed email on his tablet and turned the screen toward me. It was an email sent from Sloane's account to a consultancy firm called Silver Care Solutions. The subject line read, Urgent Assessment Request. Read the second paragraph. Calvin instructed. I read it aloud, my voice trembling slightly. Subject exhibits signs of rapid cognitive decline, paranoia, confusion regarding finances, and memory lapses. We require an expedited guardianship to secure assets for her long-term care. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. They were not just stealing from me. They were pathologizing me. They were constructing a narrative where I was the sick, confused old woman, and they were the heroic saviors stepping in to manage the fortune I was too senile to handle. This is the plan, Calvin said, his tone clinical. They uninvite you from the cruise. They tell everyone you were too unwell to travel. You stay home. They come back and file for emergency guardianship, citing your confusion and their need to take over. The cruise refusal becomes Exhibit A of your frailty. I closed the binder. The hurt was gone, replaced by the icy clarity of an operations manager spotting a critical failure in the supply chain. They think I am the variable, I said, but I am the architect. I pulled out a notepad and began to write. 5:12 a.m. Text message. Email impersonation. The power of attorney attempt. The guardianship inquiry. It was not a series of unfortunate events. It was a timeline of conspiracy. Marla, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. She was holding the cruise itinerary I had provided days ago. Lorraine. There is something else, Marla said. I was reviewing the booking details you made originally. Did you tell them about the special request you filed with the cruise line? No, I said. I wanted it to be a surprise. Look at this, Marla said, pointing to a line item on the third page. June 14th, Main Dining Hall, Special Occasion Anniversary Tribute for Richard Bishop. I stared at the line. I had paid $200 extra for a private table, a specific vintage of wine Richard loved, and a moment of silence in the program to honor the man who had built the wealth they were now trying to steal. Sloane did not know. Ethan had likely forgotten the date. They are walking into a minefield, Marla said softly. If they board that ship without me, and that tribute happens. I trailed off, realizing the implication. It proves you planned to be there. Calvin finished. It proves you were lucid, sentimental, and organized. And if you are there to witness it, and they are the ones trying to stop you, it destroys their narrative, I said. I stood up. The trembling in my hands had stopped completely. I am not just going to defend myself. Marla, I said, picking up the binder. I am going to let them think they have won. I will let them walk right up to the edge of the cliff. And when they look down, I will be the one standing at the bottom, holding the safety net they just set on fire. What is the next move? Calvin asked. I need to make sure that tribute happens, I said. And I need to make sure I am the one holding the microphone. The wooden pews of the Bayside Chapel creaked with a familiarity that usually brought me comfort. But today, the silence felt heavy. I found Pastor June Hargrove in the back garden pruning rose bushes with the same surgical precision she used to dissect scripture. June had been the one to hold my hand the day Richard died, sitting with me in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours without looking at her watch once. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at me, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. I had told her everything: the cruise, the lies, the guardianship scheme. I expected a lecture on forgiveness. I expected a sermon on turning the other cheek. Instead, June leaned against the stone wall and asked a question that cut straight through the noise. Lorraine, do you want your son to wake up, or do you want him to collapse? I hesitated. The anger in my chest was a living thing, hot and demanding. I want them to stop, I said, my voice cracking. I want them to know I am not a piece of furniture they can sell when they need cash. That is not what I asked, June said softly. If you destroy him, he breaks. If you wake him up, it might hurt him more, but he survives. You have to decide if you are a mother teaching a lesson or a judge delivering a sentence. I don't know if I can save him from her, I admitted. He is so weak. Then stop trying to be his savior and start being his mirror, June said. Come with me. She led me into the small parish hall. Sitting in a circle of folding chairs were 6 other women. I recognized a few faces: a retired teacher, a woman who ran a successful catering business. They were all over 50, all successful. And as I learned over the next hour, they had all been targets. They called themselves the Second Act Club, but the stories they shared were brutal. One woman's daughter had forged her signature on a mortgage. Another had a son who tried to declare her incompetent to get control of her bakery. They did not offer empty platitudes. They offered strategy. They offered validation. For the first time in weeks, I realized I was not a lonely widow fighting a private war. I was part of a silent legion of women who refused to be erased. I left the church feeling something stronger than anger. I felt authorized. That night, I sat at my dining table and pulled out a stack of index cards. I began to write the speech I had intended to give on the Emerald Horizon. It was supposed to be a tribute to Richard, a celebration of our 40 years together. Now, as I wrote the words, the ink seemed to darken. I was not just writing a eulogy. I was crafting a testament to my own memory. Every date, every specific detail of our life together, every financial milestone we had achieved, it was all there. If they claimed I was confused, this speech would be the hammer that shattered that lie. You are not joining us, Richard, I whispered to the empty room, but you are going to help me finish this. The next day, I began the performance. I called Ethan in the middle of the workday. When he answered, I made sure my voice sounded thin and wavering. Ethan, did I call you yesterday? I can't seem to find my calendar. I said, yeah. Mum? We talked about the power of attorney, Ethan said, his voice relaxing. He sounded relieved. He thought the plan was working. He thought the medicine was taking effect. Right. The papers? I put them somewhere safe. I get so mixed up lately, I said. I could practically hear him smiling on the other end. "It's okay. Mum, we will handle it. You just rest." I hung up and marked a tally on my notepad. Every time I played the fool, they got careless. They stopped speaking in code. They stopped hiding their tracks because they thought no one was watching. But the resolve I built at the church was tested 2 nights later. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 2:17 in the morning. I picked it up, squinting against the blue light. It was a text from Ethan. "I'm sorry, but Sloane says I have to choose. We need this fresh start. Please don't be mad." I stared at the screen for a long time. There it was. The confession. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He was not a villain. He was a coward. He was choosing the path of least resistance, even if it meant walking over his own mother. "He is not evil," I said to the darkness. "He is just broken." And that was when I knew June was right. I could not just defeat him. I had to let the consequences fall on him so heavy that he would have no choice but to build a spine to carry them. I did not reply. I turned off the phone, closed my eyes, and went to sleep. The time for talking was over. The time for the lesson had begun. The morning before the departure. My phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I answered it in the sunroom, surrounded by the silence of a house that felt too big for one person. "Mrs. Bishop, this is Brenda from Guardian Senior Health?" A sugary voice chirped on the other end. "Your daughter-in-law, Sloane, arranged a complimentary cognitive wellness check for you. We can do it right over the phone. It is just a few questions to ensure you are safe at home." My grip on the phone tightened. It was an ambush. If I stuttered, if I forgot a date, or if I simply sounded confused, this stranger would write a report that would end up in a courtroom. "Oh, that is so kind of her," I said, letting my voice waver just enough. "But I am about to step into the bath. Can we do this?" "Later, it will only take 10 minutes. Brenda pressed, her tone losing some of its sugar. "I really must go," I said, and hung up. I called Marla immediately. "It is the setup," Marla confirmed, her voice crisp and professional. "They are trying to generate a medical paper trail. If they can get a third-party professional to flag concern, they can file for emergency temporary guardianship while they are on the cruise. By the time they get back, they would have a court order allowing them to freeze your accounts. I am not going to let them paint me as incompetent," I said. "Then we get ahead of it," Marla said. "I have set up an appointment with Dr. Aris. He is a court-certified neurologist. Go there, now. Get the full battery of tests. We need a time-stamped report stating you are sound of mind." 2 hours later, I sat in Dr. Aris's office. I performed every memory test, solved every logic puzzle, and recited lists of words backward and forward. When I was finished, Dr. Aris signed the affidavit with a flourish. "Lorraine, your cognitive function is better than most of my 40-year-old patients," he said, handing me the document. "This is bulletproof." I took the paper. It felt heavier than a mere few sheets. It felt like a shield. My next stop was not home. It was the administrative offices of the cruise line at Port Wilmington Point. The ship, the Emerald Horizon, was already docked, looming like a white skyscraper against the grey sky. I walked into the customer service center, bypassing the line of excited tourists, and asked for the senior manifest manager. Mr. Henderson was a man who looked like he had spent too many years staring at spreadsheets. He looked annoyed until I placed my platinum credit card and my ID on his desk. I need to review the booking for the Bishop party, I said calmly. I am the financial guarantor. He typed for a moment, frowning at his screen. Ah, yes, Mrs. Bishop. We actually have a pending ticket on this file, Henderson said, spinning the monitor slightly so I could see. We received an email 3 days ago requesting your removal from the passenger list due to medical incapacity. It came from an Ethan Bishop. And did you process it? I asked. We put a hold on it, Henderson admitted. Company policy requires the primary cardholder to verify any changes that result in a refund or significant itinerary shift. We sent a verification email to you, but I never received it because they likely deleted it from my account, I said, keeping my voice level. Mr. Henderson, look at me. Do I look incapacitated? He blinked, surprised by the steel in my tone. No, ma'am. Good. I want a note added to this file immediately, I commanded. Write this down. Primary payer must approve any changes. No one is to be removed or added without my physical signature in front of a staff member. Is that clear, crystal clear? Henderson said, typing rapidly. I have locked the file. You are still listed as a passenger in Suite A1. Thank you, I said. I walked back to my car, the sea breeze whipping my hair across my face. The trap was set. The legal protection was in place. The financial control was locked. Now, I just needed to get them to the pier. I sat in the driver's seat and composed a text to Ethan. I kept it simple, playing the part of the doting, oblivious mother one last time. I know I'm not coming, but I have a surprise gift for you and Sloane. It is a big one. I will come to the port tomorrow just to sign the papers and give it to you before you board. Meet me at the drop-off zone. I watched the screen, waiting. The 3 dots appeared, then vanished. They appeared again. They were discussing it. They were weighing the annoyance of seeing me against the greed for whatever big gift I was promising. Finally, the reply came. But it was not from Ethan. The tone was sharp, dismissive, and unmistakably Sloane. Fine. But you only get 10 minutes. We have a schedule. Don't make a scene and don't bother us with drama. I looked at the message. She thought she was granting me an audience. She thought she was setting the boundaries. I typed back a single word. Sure. I put the phone in my purse and started the engine. 10 minutes was all I needed. 10 minutes was more than enough time to tear their world down. Port Wilmington Point was a spectacle of organized chaos. The air smelled of diesel fumes and expensive sunscreen. I stood near the drop-off zone, clutching a small bakery box and a thick manila envelope. I wore my oldest beige cardigan and sensible shoes. I looked exactly like the harmless, pliable grandmother they expected me to be. Ethan and Sloane stepped out of a black luxury car service. They looked like a magazine advertisement for the perfect life. Ethan wore crisp linen, and Sloane had a wide-brimmed sun hat perched on her head that likely cost $300. They had 3 matching designer suitcases. They looked wealthy. They looked happy. They did not see me at first. I watched as Sloane grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him close. She whispered, but the wind carried her voice right to me. Remember, keep it short, she hissed. Get the signature and get rid of her. Do not let her near the boarding ramp. I stepped forward, putting a soft, trembling smile on my face. Hello, darlings, I called out. Ethan jumped. Guilt flashed across his face, but he quickly masked it with a stiff smile. Mom, he said. You made it. I wouldn't miss saying goodbye, I said, I held out the envelope, and I brought the paperwork for the trip. The final gift. Sloane did not wait for Ethan to take it. She reached out and snatched the envelope from my hand. Her eyes lit up with a hunger she didn't bother to hide. She thought it was the power of attorney. She thought it was a check. "Thanks, Lorraine," Sloane said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness as she tore the flap open. "This really helps us relax." She pulled out the stack of papers. She looked at the top sheet. Then she flipped to the second, then the third. Her smile faltered. Her skin turned the color of the concrete beneath our feet. It was not a check. The first page was the credit card receipt for $8,400, with my signature circled in red ink. The second page was a printout of the email sent from Ethan's account to the cruise line, requesting my removal. The third was the medical affidavit from Dr. Aris, stamped and dated yesterday, certifying my cognitive health as excellent. Sloane looked up, her voice shrill. "What is this you have been following us. You have been spying on us," I said, my voice calm and carrying clearly over the crowd. "I don't spy. Sloane, I just keep receipts. I am simply auditing my investment." Ethan stared at the papers in Sloane's shaking hands. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "Mom." He started, but his voice broke. The tension in our circle had drawn attention. A uniformed cruise line employee with a clipboard stepped toward us, sensing the disturbance. "Is everything all right here, folks?" he asked, his customer service smile tight. "No, it is not," I said firmly. "I am the financial guarantor for this booking. I need a manager here immediately to clarify the passenger rights regarding the primary payer." Sloane laughed, a high, nervous sound. She tried to step between me and the employee. "It is fine. Just a family thing," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "My mother-in-law gets a little confused when she's off her routine. We are handling it." "Confused," I repeated the word. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out one last sheet of paper. It was the printout of the PDF from her email trash. I held it up. The title was bold and undeniable. "Guardianship Options for Aging Relatives." I looked straight at the approaching manager, then turned my gaze to Ethan. "Is this the confusion you are talking about?" "Sloane," I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "Tell me, was the plan to enjoy the balcony suite I paid for while you filled out the forms to have me declared incompetent? Were you two planning to use this trip as proof that I was too frail to manage my own money?" Ethan's face went crimson. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the document, then at me, and I saw the moment the reality of what I knew hit him. Sloane stood frozen, the papers crinkling in her grip. For the first time, the perfect daughter-in-law had absolutely nothing to say. Ethan grabbed my elbow, his grip tight enough to bruise. He dragged me toward the shadow of the terminal building, away from the curious eyes of the other passengers. His face was slick with sweat, and the polished veneer he wore like a costume was cracking apart. "Mom, please," Ethan hissed, his eyes darting around wildly. "You have to stop this. You are doing this on purpose. You are making a scene. You are killing me here." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had nursed through fevers, the boy I had championed when the world told him he was average. I felt nothing but a hollow ache where my love used to live. "No, Ethan," I said. my voice steady and cold. You let me die in your heart a long time ago. I am just finally burying the body. Sloane stomped over to us, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. She did not look frightened anymore. She looked vicious. She shoved herself between me and Ethan, turning her back on him to face me. Oh, stop it. You are such a manipulator, Sloane spat, her voice rising so that people nearby began to turn and watch. This is classic, isn't it? The toxic mother who can't stand to see her son happy. You want to ruin his vacation because you are lonely and bitter. You are trying to control him with your money because that is the only thing you have left. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself against her insults. Instead, I turned to the cruise line manager who had followed us, looking increasingly uncomfortable. I pulled a folded document from my purse. It was the letter Marla had drafted that morning. This is a legal notice from my attorney, I said, handing it to the manager. It states that any alteration to the passenger manifest regarding the cabin I paid for, without my direct written consent, constitutes transaction fraud. If you allow them to board using a booking I funded after they attempted to remove me, the cruise line will be named as a co-conspirator in a lawsuit for financial elder abuse. The manager's eyes widened as he scanned the letter. He looked up at Ethan and Sloane. Mr. Bishop, the manager said, his tone hardening. Is this true? Did you attempt to remove the primary payer from the booking without her consent? Ethan panicked. He looked at the ship, then at the manager, and finally at his wife. The pressure was too much for him. I didn't want to, Ethan stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Sloane. She made me do it, she said. She said Mom wouldn't know. She forced me to send that email. Sloane whipped around, her face twisting in shock. Excuse me. You are throwing me under the bus. You wanted this trip just as much as I did. Not like this. Ethan yelled. I told you it was risky. Risky. Sloane laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Who cares? Look at her. She is sitting on a pile of cash she doesn't even use. She is old. Ethan. She has money. So why let it sit there? Why shouldn't we use it now, when we actually need it? The air around us seemed to freeze. Sloane stopped breathing as she realized what she had just screamed in front of a cruise line official, a dozen bystanders, and her mother-in-law. I felt the slap of her words, but I did not flinch. Instead, a small, sad smile touched my lips. Thank you, Sloane, I said softly. I really needed a witness for that part. I turned back to the manager. I would like to request port security, I said formally. I am filing an immediate report for attempted identity and authorization misuse regarding this transaction and the fraudulent power of attorney they attempted to have me sign. Sloane's eyes went wide with genuine terror. She scrambled for her purse, her hands fumbling as she pulled out her phone. I am calling my dad, she muttered, tapping the screen frantically. He knows people. We are not doing this. She lifted the phone to her ear, but before she could make the connection, a man in a grey suit stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. It was Calvin. He walked up to our circle with the casual confidence of a man holding all the aces. He flipped open his wallet to reveal his private investigator credentials. Mrs. Whitaker, Calvin said, his voice deep and authoritative. I wouldn't make that call if I were you. In fact, I would put the phone down. Anything you say or do from this second forward is evidence in an active fraud investigation. Sloane lowered the phone slowly, Her face was grey. She looked at the ship, then at the water, and finally realized there was nowhere left to run. Marla stepped forward from the crowd, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. She was not alone. Beside her walked a man with a buzz cut and a grim expression, a process server. He didn't say a word. He simply extended his hand and pressed a thick stack of folded documents into Ethan's chest. Ethan Bishop. Sloane Whitaker, the man said, his voice flat. You have been served. Ethan took the papers, his hands shaking so violently that the pages rustled like dry leaves in a storm. Sloane, however, let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. This is ridiculous, she scoffed, not even looking at the documents. You are serving us with what a lawsuit because we hurt your feelings. Read the bold print. Sloane, Marla said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. Sloane snatched the papers from Ethan. Her eyes scanned the top page, and her smirk vanished instantly. I watched the blood drain from her face as she read the list of charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of medical records with intent to obtain guardianship, and unauthorized interference with financial assets. It also included a temporary restraining order granted by a judge less than an hour ago. This says we can't go near your accounts, Sloane whispered. It says you can't go near me, I corrected her. I stepped closer, maintaining a safe distance but close enough to look my son in the eye. And you don't need to worry about these court dates interfering with your vacation, I said. Because there is no vacation. What do you mean? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. I cancelled the booking, I said. As the financial guarantor, I exercised my right to void the transaction 15 minutes ago. The suite, the drink packages, the excursions, they are all gone. Sloane looked like she was going to scream. You took the money back, you petty, selfish old I didn't take a dime. I interrupted her. I instructed the cruise line to process the refund of $8,400 directly to a new account. I donated the entire amount to the Seabrook Harbor Vocational Fund for displaced older workers. I pointed to the receipt in my hand. It is the Richard Bishop Memorial Scholarship. I said, Dad always hated it when people tried to get something for nothing. I thought it was a fitting tribute. Ethan stared at me, his eyes wide and wet. Mom, you did all this just to get revenge on me? No, I said firmly. I did this to give myself a choice. You took away my agency. Today, I took it back. Sloane did not want to hear it. Panic had fully set in. She grabbed Ethan's arm and yanked him toward the gangway where the check-in agents were standing. She is lying, Sloane yelled. We have the boarding passes on my phone. Come on. Ethan. She ran to the scanner, breathless, and shoved her phone under the laser. The machine let out a low, discordant buzz. The light on the turnstile flashed a bright, angry red. I am sorry, ma'am, the security officer said, stepping in front of her. This reservation has been voided. You cannot board the ship. But we are here. Our bags are here. Sloane shrieked, her composure shattering completely. You need to step back, the officer warned. They were trapped. No cruise, no money, no home to go back to without facing the shame of their friends and the looming threat of legal action. I walked up to Ethan one last time. I held out a final, thin envelope. This isn't money, I said. This is a copy of my updated will and the new trust agreement Marla drew up. You are no longer the default beneficiary of my estate. Everything is now in a protected trust. Ethan took the envelope. He didn't open it. He just crumpled, his knees hitting the pavement. He didn't look at Sloane. He looked at the ground. And for the first time in years, he spoke without a filter. I was scared. "Mum," he choked out, tears dripping onto the asphalt. "I lost my job. I was terrified of being poor. I I couldn't stand seeing you do so well while I was failing. I wanted the safety net. You can have a safety net." "Ethan," I said, looking down at him with a mixture of pity and resolve, "but you cannot weave it out of my skin." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the parking lot, the sound of the ocean crashing against the pier filling my ears. Behind me, I could hear Sloane arguing with the security guards, but Ethan was silent. I got into my car and locked the door. My hands were finally steady. I put the key in the ignition, but before I could turn it, my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from Ethan. "Mum, I am going to the lawyer. I want to confess. I don't want to live like this anymore. I am sorry." I did not reply. Not yet. I looked out the windshield at the vast, open horizon where the sea met the sky. "Finally," I whispered to the waves. "Finally, you chose the truth." Wow, that was quite a ride, wasn't it? Thank you so much for listening to this story with me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment down below with your city or country. Let's see how far our family reaches. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story get heard by even more people. See you in the next one.